The black luxury car stopped at the red light. Rainwater slid slowly across the dark glass. Outside, the city moved the way it always did. Fast, indifferent, noisy. Street vendors pulled plastic covers over their carts. Office workers hurried across the crosswalk with their heads down. Drivers honked impatiently. And inside the back seat of the car sat Adrian Vale, one of the richest men in the country, staring blankly through the tinted window as if none of it belonged to him anymore. His tie was loose, his face was pale, and his right hand trembled slightly. Across from him sat a leather folder containing the latest medical report. He had already read it 3 times. The diagnosis had not changed. The treatment had not changed, and neither had the timeline. 3 months, maybe 4. That was how long the doctors believed he had left. Even the most expensive specialists had all said the same thing in different words. The illness was progressing. The damage could not be reversed. Adrian closed his eyes for a moment. For 42 years, he had believed every problem could be solved with enough money, intelligence, or determination. But now he had discovered the one thing his wealth could not negotiate with: time. The driver glanced at him through the mirror. "Sir, should I take the longer route? Traffic is heavy near the old market." Adrian opened his eyes again. He usually avoided that part of the city, but that day nothing felt worth avoiding. "Keep going," he said quietly. The car rolled forward. Another block, another traffic light, another crowd of strangers in the rain, and then tap. A small hand touched the window. One of the bodyguards immediately turned. A little girl stood on the sidewalk. She couldn't have been older than 8. Her sweater was thin, her shoes were worn. Her hair clung to her forehead from the rain, but her eyes were calm. Not begging, not frightened, just calm. The bodyguard lowered his window slightly. "Move away from the car." The girl didn't move. Instead, she looked past him, directly at Adrian. Adrian frowned. "Wait." The bodyguard turned. "Sir, lower the window." The glass slid down. Rain and city noise filled the car. The girl looked at Adrian. "You're very sick," she said softly. The bodyguard laughed. But Adrian didn't, because she was right. "What's your name?" Adrian asked. "Lena, how old are you?" 8. "Where are your parents?" Lena looked away briefly. "I don't have any." The traffic light turned green. Cars behind them honked, but Adrian ignored it. "Why did you say I'm sick?" he asked. Lena shrugged. "My grandmother used to look like that before she died." No one spoke for a moment. Adrian studied her carefully. "When was the last time you ate something warm?" he asked. She lifted a plastic bag. Inside were pieces of bread and empty bottles. The bodyguard looked uncomfortable. Adrian opened the car door. "Get in." The bodyguard stared. "Sir?" "She's coming with us." The Vale mansion stood behind tall iron gates, marble floors, glass walls, large gardens. When Adrian walked inside with Lena, the staff froze. The house manager approached carefully. "Sir, who is this child?" Adrian answered calmly. "She's staying here." Lena looked around the enormous hall. "Do you live here alone?" "Yes." She studied the empty space. "That's sad." The words were simple, but they hit Adrian harder than he expected. Mrs. Duarte led Lena down a long, silent corridor. The little girl walked slowly, taking everything in. The soft carpets, the paintings on the walls, the lights that looked like small stars fixed to the ceiling. To Lena, the place felt like a museum, or maybe a hotel, but it did not feel like a home. She stopped in the middle of the corridor. "Do you live here?" she asked the housekeeper. Mrs. Duarte smiled gently. "I work here." "Then who lives here?" "Mr. Adrian." Lena looked back toward the huge hall they had just crossed. "Just him?" "Yes." The little girl frowned. "It's too big for one person." Mrs. Duarte said nothing, because deep down she had thought exactly the same thing for years. In the blue guest room, Lena stood frozen at the doorway. The room was larger than any place she had ever slept in. The bed looked enormous. The curtains were soft. There was a small balcony overlooking the garden. Mrs. Duarte crouched down so she could speak at Lena's level. "We'll start with a hot bath." Lena hesitated. "It means taking off your clothes." The girl held onto the coat Adrian had placed over her shoulders. "I've never used a shower like that. I'll show you." Warm water began to fall. Lena put her hand beneath it and widened her eyes. She had never felt something so simple and so comforting at the same time. Meanwhile, Mrs. Duarte set out new clothes. Small shirts, pants, socks. When Lena stepped out of the bathroom, she looked like a different child. But something in her expression was still the same, that unusual calm. In the dining room, Adrian sat alone at the long table. He stared at a glass of water, as if trying to decide whether it was worth drinking. His body was exhausted, but his mind was more restless than usual. When Lena entered, he looked up. For a second, he almost didn't recognize her. She looked lighter, healthier. "You look different," he said. "I'm clean," she replied. Adrian let out a small laugh. It was a rare sound in that house. Mrs. Duarte placed food on the table. Hot soup, fresh bread, chicken. Lena looked at it all as if it were a dream. "You can eat," Adrian said. She started slowly, then faster, but always carefully, like someone used to wasting nothing. Adrian watched her in silence. After a few minutes, Lena asked, "Aren't you going to eat?" "I'm not very hungry." "Because you're sick?" Adrian was quiet, then nodded. "Yes." Lena dipped the bread into the soup. "My grandmother used to say sick people need company." Adrian tilted his head. company. Yes, she said, loneliness is a hidden disease. The sentence lingered in the air. An hour later, a car pulled up in front of the mansion. Clara Vale walked inside with quick steps. She was Adrian's younger sister. Elegant, direct, always ready to say exactly what she thought. But when she entered the dining room, she stopped, because she saw Lena. "Who is this?" Adrian answered calmly. "Lena, I can see that." Clara crossed her arms. "Why is there an unknown child in your house?" Adrian remained seated. "She's going to stay here for a while." Clara looked at Lena, then at her brother. "You're dying and decided to open an orphanage." The phrase was harsh, but Lena answered before Adrian could. "He's not dying today." Clara blinked. "Excuse me." Lena shrugged. "People die faster when everyone keeps saying they will." Adrian lowered his eyes, hiding a faint smile. Clara fell silent for a few seconds, then sighed. "I don't have the energy to argue today." But she threw a serious look at her brother. "We're talking tomorrow." That night, Adrian woke up at 3 in the morning. That happened almost every night. Pain in his chest, short breathing. But something was different. He sat up slowly in bed. The room was silent. And for the first time in weeks, the pain wasn't intense. Only fatigue remained. He walked to the balcony. The garden was lit by moonlight. And down below, near the fountain, he saw a small figure, Lena, sitting in the grass, looking up at the sky. Adrian went downstairs slowly and walked toward her. "What are you doing awake?" "I like looking at the stars." "Why?" She pointed upward. "My grandmother said each star is someone who already lived." Adrian sat beside her. "Do you miss her?" "Every day." He remained silent. Then asked, "Did she teach you a lot of things?" "A lot. How to tell when someone is sick." Adrian looked at her. "And how to heal them." Lena thought for a moment. She said the body is like a house. If no one enters, it starts to break. Adrian looked at the enormous mansion behind them, and for the first time, he understood exactly what she meant. The next morning, the doctors arrived for his weekly appointment. They reviewed the exams, studied the numbers. Then exchanged confused looks. "This is strange," one of them said. Adrian raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" "Your indicators improved." "Improved?" "Yes, not by much, but enough to be unexpected." Adrian looked through the window. Lena was in the garden trying to feed a bird, and for the first time in months, he felt something that had completely disappeared: hope. The next morning, the mansion felt different. Not physically. The walls were the same. The corridors were still silent, but something in the atmosphere had changed. For the first time in years, there was the sound of a child. Lena ran slowly through the garden, looking at everything as if she were discovering a new world. She stopped near the stone fountain. The water fell gently. She put her hand into it and smiled. From the balcony, Adrian watched her. Mrs. Duarte appeared beside him. She woke up early, the housekeeper said. Adrian nodded. She seems happy. Children tend to be happy when they feel safe. Adrian remained silent for a few seconds. Does she feel safe here? Mrs. Duarte looked at Lena, more than anywhere she's ever been, I imagine. Later that morning, Clara returned to the mansion. She walked straight into Adrian's office. Closed the door. We need to talk. Adrian remained seated behind the desk. I imagined so. Clara crossed her arms. Who exactly is that girl? I already told you. No. You gave me a short version. She leaned slightly forward. You found a child on the street and decided to bring her home. Adrian replied calmly. Yes, Clara sighed. You were one of the richest men in the country. You're sick. And now there is an unknown child living inside your house. Adrian didn't answer. Clara continued. You understand how dangerous that looks, don't you? She's 8 years old. That doesn't mean someone isn't using her. The sentence hung in the room. Adrian finally looked up. You think someone placed a child in the street, hoping I would pass by in my car? Clara hesitated. It's not impossible. Adrian leaned back in his chair. You always see conspiracies, and you always see people as better than they are. They fell silent. Then Adrian said something unexpected. She's honest. Clara frowned. You barely know her. She was the only person who told me the truth yesterday. About what? Adrian answered simply. I'm dying. Meanwhile, Lena was exploring the garden. She found a small wooden bench near an old tree, sat down, looked at the mansion, then at her own hands. She still didn't fully believe she was there. One of the bodyguards approached slowly. He was the same man who had opened the car door the day before. Do you like it here? He asked. Lena shrugged. It's quiet. You prefer noise. Noise means people are there. The guard thought for a second before answering. There haven't been many people here. Lena tilted her head. Why? Because the boss works a lot, and people who work too much end up alone. Lena was silent, then said something simple. My grandmother used to say rich people are sometimes poorer than people on the street. The guard smiled faintly. Maybe she was right. That afternoon, Adrian had an episode. He was in his office reviewing documents when the pain returned, stronger than in the previous days. His chest tightened. His breathing became uneven. He tried to stand, but his legs failed. The glass of water fell from the desk and shattered on the floor. Mrs. Duarte heard the noise and rushed in. Sir! Adrian was gripping the desk, trying to breathe. Call the doctor, he said with difficulty. The bodyguards ran. Clara appeared in the hallway. The entire house burst into motion, but Lena arrived first. She stood in the doorway, watched the scene, then walked over to Adrian. The adults were too busy panicking to notice at first. Lena placed her small hand on his arm, breathed slowly. Adrian tried. Slower, she said. Like this, she demonstrated by breathing deeply, as my grandmother used to do. Adrian copied her movement. Once, twice, 3 times. The pain began to ease. By the time the doctor arrived a few minutes later, Adrian was seated again, exhausted, but stable. The doctor looked at him in surprise. The episode should have gotten worse. Adrian turned toward Lena. She was leaning quietly against the wall, as if what had happened were nothing unusual. That night, Adrian found Lena in the garden again. She was looking at the stars. He sat beside her. "You knew what you were doing today." She shrugged. "My grandmother taught me." "Was she a doctor?" "No." "Then how did she know?" Lena looked at him. She took care of many people, on the streets, sick people, lonely people. Adrian stayed quiet, then asked, "And you think you can help me too?" Lena answered with the same calm as always. "I think you can help yourself." "How?" She pointed to the mansion behind them. "By stopping living alone inside such a big house." The next morning, the mansion felt quieter than usual. After Adrian's crisis the previous afternoon, everyone was alert. The doctors had left strict instructions. He needed rest, no stress, but Adrian couldn't sleep. He was sitting on the balcony, looking at the garden, when Lena appeared again. She was carrying 2 cups. Mrs. Duarte said, "You need tea." Adrian took the cup. "Since when do you give orders in my house?" Lena answered without hesitation. "Since you almost fainted yesterday." Adrian let out a small laugh. Something that hadn't happened often in a long time. He took a sip of tea, then looked at her. "You talk a lot about your grandmother." Lena sat in the chair beside him. "She was the strongest person I ever knew. What happened to her?" Lena looked toward the garden. "The illness, like mine?" "No, worse." Adrian was silent. Lena continued. "She took care of people nobody wanted. On the street, some died, others got better." Adrian asked with curiosity, "Was she a doctor?" Lena shook her head. "No. She just said that when someone feels they still matter to someone, the body fights harder." Adrian looked at her carefully. The phrase was simple, but it made sense. As the days passed, Lena's presence began changing the mansion's routine. She spoke to the staff, asked names, helped Mrs. Duarte in the kitchen, talked to the bodyguards in the garden. Simple things, but things that hadn't happened in that house for years. One afternoon, Clara watched Lena from the window. She was teaching one of the gardeners how to make a small paper boat. Clara turned to Adrian. "That girl is strange," Adrian answered calmly. "Why? She acts like she's been here for years." Adrian looked through the window too. "Maybe because nobody ever told her she couldn't." Clara sighed. "You realize everyone here is starting to like her." "I realize that." A week later, Adrian returned to the hospital. The tests were routine, or they were supposed to be. The doctor studied the results in silence, then asked for new tests, then studied them again. Adrian noticed the confusion. "What happened?" The doctor took a slow breath. "Your levels are improving." "That's impossible." "Technically, yes," Adrian asked, "then explain it." The doctor shook his head. "Sometimes the body reacts to emotional changes. Less stress, more motivation, more desire to live." Adrian immediately thought of Lena. That night, Clara entered his office carrying an envelope. "I did some research." Adrian looked up. "On Lena." His face grew serious. "What did you find?" Clara placed the envelope on the desk. "She didn't lie. There's no record of her parents, only her grandmother." Adrian opened the envelope. Inside was an old document. Clara continued. "Her grandmother worked at a community hospital." Adrian frowned. Hospital? Yes. She wasn't officially a doctor, but she helped volunteer doctors. Adrian kept reading. Then something caught his attention. A name. The same hospital where he had once been treated years earlier. Clara noticed. "You saw it too?" Adrian slowly lifted his eyes. "Her grandmother worked in the hospital where I was treated." Clara nodded. For years, Adrian closed the envelope. A strange sensation moved through him. As if everything were connected somehow. Later, Adrian found Lena again in the garden. He sat beside her. "Lena." "Yes." "Did your grandmother work in a place called Santa Aurora?" She thought for a moment. "Yes." Adrian breathed deeply. "I was there once." Lena looked at him. "Really?" Adrian nodded. "Many years ago." She smiled. "Then maybe she took care of you before." Adrian was silent, because for the first time, that possibility felt real. That night, Adrian barely slept. The hospital's name stayed in his mind. Santa Aurora. He remembered that place. Years earlier, when his company was still small, he had been hospitalized there for several days after a car accident. Back then, he had been just another patient. No fame, no empire, no fortune. And now there was a chance that Lena's grandmother had been there during that same time. In some way, life seemed to be circling back on itself. The next morning, Adrian found Lena in the kitchen. She was sitting on a high chair watching Mrs. Duarte prepare coffee. "Good morning," Adrian said. Lena looked up and smiled. "Did you sleep better?" Adrian nodded. "Almost." He pulled out a chair. "I need to ask you something." Lena tilted her head. "About your grandmother." She immediately grew more serious. What about her? Do you remember if she took care of a man who had a car accident many years ago? Lena thought for a few seconds. She took care of a lot of people, but I remember she talked about one man. Adrian felt his heart speed up. What man? A young man who had no one visiting him. Adrian went completely still. She said he looked lonely, but that he had the eyes of someone who wouldn't give up. Lena looked directly at him. Was it you? Adrian took a deep breath. Maybe. Later that day, Clara returned to Adrian's office with more documents. I confirmed it. Adrian raised his eyes. What? Lena's grandmother? She really was at the hospital when you had your accident. Adrian was silent. Clara continued, and there's something else. She placed a small file on the table. She was one of the people who insisted you receive treatment more quickly. Adrian opened the file. Inside was an old handwritten note. The handwriting was simple, but the message was clear. This man still has a lot left to live. Adrian closed his eyes for a few seconds. The woman who had helped save his life years earlier was the grandmother of the girl now living in his house. Over the following weeks, something began to change inside Adrian. He started working less, spending more time in the garden, talking more with Lena. She asked simple questions. Questions nobody else asked. Do you like your job? Do you have friends? Why is your house so quiet? Each question seemed to dismantle pieces of the life Adrian had built. A life full of achievements, but empty of simple things. 3 months later, Adrian returned to the hospital for another round of tests. The doctors looked at the results in silence. Then one of them spoke. "This is unexpected. What happened?" Adrian asked. The illness has stopped progressing. Stopped? Yes, we can't explain it. That evening, Adrian returned home and found Lena sitting by the fountain in the garden. "I have good news," he said. "The doctors said the disease stopped." Lena smiled. "I told you." Adrian sat beside her. "You saved my life." She shook her head. "No. You saved it yourself." "How?" "You remembered how to live." Adrian looked at the huge mansion behind them. For years he had believed success meant power and money. But now he understood something different. Sometimes the person who changes your life is just a small girl knocking on your car window in the rain.